Hey everyone, welcome back to On Purpose, the #1 health podcast in the world. Thanks to each and every single one of you who I'm so grateful to that you come back every single week to listen, to learn, and to grow. Now, I'm really excited and grateful for today's guest. I think this is going to be a conversation that I know a lot of you have been looking forward to, and I know it's going to be a conversation that's going to help you with wherever you are in life right now. So please, please, please welcome to the show the one and only Lori Gottlieb. Now, Lori Gottlieb is a psychotherapist and New York Times bestselling author of Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, which is being adapted as a television series with Eva Longoria. In addition to her clinical practice, she writes the Atlantic's weekly Dear Therapist advice column and contributes regularly to the New York Times and many other publications. She's a member of the Advisory Council for Bring Change to Mind. Lori is a sought-after expert in media such as The Today Show, Good Morning America, and NPR's Fresh Air. Her new Dear Therapist podcast, produced by Katie Couric and co-hosted with Guy Winch, helps listeners to see themselves more clearly and debuts this spring. Make sure you check it out and subscribe in advance. I'm excited to learn more about therapy, human relationships, and more. Welcome to the show, Lori, and her new book, Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. We will put the link to the book into all the captions and comments, so make sure you go and grab a copy. Lori, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
No, this is a real treat. And as we were preparing, I ran into how many mutual friends we have or mutual people that we've crossed paths with. So I've interviewed Guy.
Wow.
Feels like many lifetimes ago, but when I was at HuffPost with Ariana Huffington. And at the same time, Eva Longoria is a really close friend. So it's just, I feel like, and then you know Jim and Eamon.
Yes.
So when it all comes together, it's always...
It's a small world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I want to start somewhere where I'm not sure, maybe you get asked it a lot or not, but I'd love to start with, tell me about your latest adventure with your son.
My latest adventure with my son. Well, there are a lot of adventures because he's 14.
Yeah.
And he's a really interesting person at this age. I think that when kids are younger, you have more of a hierarchy in the family. And I think all of a sudden they start thinking in all of these complex ways, and they hold up a mirror to you and make you ask questions about yourself and the world in a different way. So I would say our adventures are conversations.
Nice. And does what you know about the human mind and connection and relationships, where does it help and where does it hinder in the parenting process?
That's such a great question. I think what it does is it gives me an awareness of the importance of letting people access their feelings. So many times as parents, we get uncomfortable with a feeling that our kids are having, and we try to talk them out of their feelings. So, a kid says, I'm angry about that. And we say, really? You're so sensitive. Or we say, or they say, I'm sad. And we say, oh, well, here's a balloon, let's go to Disneyland, right? We try to sort of talk them out of it. Or I'm scared. And we say, oh, don't be scared. There's nothing to be scared about. Be brave. And I think what happens is then people don't know how to access their feelings because they were always talked out of them. So I think the benefit, the upside of being the child of a therapist is that nothing gets swept under the rug. The downside is that he'll be totally screwed up anyway because, that's life.
Yeah. And what are the lasting effects of that? What you're saying is spot on. Like, we're always trying to negate or neglect feelings and emotions that people share with us. What are the long-lasting effects of that? Well, in adulthood.
Right. I think what happens is that people try to get rid of their feelings. They don't realize that feelings are positive, that our feelings are a compass, that they give us information. If you're sad, why are you sad? What needs to change? If you're anxious, what is that telling you about what's not working in your life? Even envy. People are so afraid of envy. And I always say to people, follow your envy. It tells you what you want. So instead of sitting there and looking at what everybody else has, say, what do I want? How can this help me to take the small step that I need to take to do something different so I can have what I want? So what happens is people will minimize their feelings. Well, I have a roof over my head and food on the table, so I shouldn't be sad. I shouldn't be anxious. I shouldn't feel the way that I feel. People will try to numb out their feelings. So many people feel like numbness is a way of, like kind of managing their feelings. But I feel like numbness isn't nothingness. Numbness is, it's not not having feelings. It's being overwhelmed by too many feelings. And your feelings don't go away just because you push them down. And that's the problem, because our feelings will come out in behaviors, in a short-temperedness, in anxiety, in too much food or wine or time on the internet. A colleague of mine calls the internet, she said, it's the most effective short-term non-prescription painkiller out there.
True. And like every non-prescription painkiller, it also has a lot of side effects.
Well, yeah.
Terrible ones.
The problem is that if you don't know what you feel, you don't know what your story is, right? And I think that our stories are this way of making sense of our lives. And so what happens is I, as a therapist, see people come in and they tell me their story. And the thing is, their story, there's so many problems with the story. We're all unreliable narrators, right? We're telling a story in a particular way. But I think if we don't know what we feel, we only see a very narrow part of the story and it limits us.
Yeah, so true. And I feel half the challenge is also that we've just become so disconnected with knowing how we feel about anything. So, I mean, one of the things that really helps me is I'm always thinking, like, after eating a meal, I know whether I like that cuisine or not. Like, it's very clear to me. After I watch a movie, I know whether I like the movie or not. So I often try and apply that same sense check with myself after I meet a person, after I go to a place, after I interact with an energy. Is that a good habit? Is that a habit that you recommend? What are the easiest ways to getting closer to our feelings and actually understand how we feel about something or someone?
Well, I think the first thing is to notice when you get afraid of a feeling. I think it's almost like our fear of our feelings is scarier than the feelings themselves. So, what happens is somebody might feel something that they feel like somebody else might not like. And so they say, I'm going to adjust my feeling to please others, to make sure that it's how I'm supposed to feel about this. And then they lose their sense of their place of knowing. We all have a place of knowing inside of us. And we sometimes, it's almost like we get lost and we can't find it because we're so concerned about how people are going to feel about the way we feel.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I find like, a big part of that is also a survival mechanism, right? Like it's a feeling of like community or feeling of tribe where we want to feel almost artificial connection because that feels safer than feeling uncertain disconnection.
Right. It's for survival, we have to connect, we have to belong. You can't be alone. You will get eaten by, wherever you are. Yeah. So you have to have the tribe around you. But the problem is that it's not an authentic way of having the tribe around you when you're pretending to be something that you're not. So many people in therapy, for instance, they come in and they have a mask on, and they're so afraid of, they want to entertain me. They want to be liked by me. They're afraid that they're boring. And I always say that if you show me the truth of who you are, I will be fascinated by you. No matter what that truth is. But if you're like, look over here, look over here, look over here, I'm going to be so bored.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there going, what is this person trying to tell me? What is the significance of what they're saying? And what they're really doing is trying to keep me out.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's almost like being like a magician who's scared away of giving their tricks and you're trying to keep everyone entertained, but then you never see that person beyond that mask.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Tell me about a time when you've given someone some advice where you actually realized that you didn't feel it was the best advice. Like, how does a therapist process that? Because I feel like in any profession, whether I'm a coach, you're a therapist, like when you're giving advice, it's almost like there are times when you're so certain about a belief, you're so certain about value. And then I've looked back at stuff I've said and just been like, I was so wrong. Have you ever felt that? And how do you reconcile that for you and the person you've been working with?
I think it's really important for me to remember that I might know what I would do in a certain situation, but that might not be the best choice for them because I'm not living their life. So I have this word taped up in my office. It's ultra-crepidarianism. And it means the habit of giving advice or opinions outside of one's knowledge or competence.
I love it.
And I think that applies to our friendships and our romantic relationship, everything, because you can't know what another person should do. You can help them come to a place of knowing for themselves what they should do. Yeah. So I'm always working to help people to figure out, to get to that place of what should I do and not ask the outside world and not, we crowdsource on the internet. We do that. Like we ask the internet. People will type in these questions like, husband is cheating. What should I do? And they crowdsource that. And it will be different for each person.
We all shop online a lot, but did you know you can make online shopping even better? You can with Honey. Honey is the free online shopping tool that saves you money online. Honey automatically finds the best promo codes and applies them to your cart, which makes online shopping finally feel as easy as it's supposed to be. Let me walk you through how it works. Imagine you're shopping one of your favorite sites like Target, Best Buy, Sephora, Macy's, eBay, Etsy, Walmart. When you check out, this little box drops down and all you have to do is click Apply Coupons. Wait a few seconds for it to scan for every promo code on the internet and watch the prices drop. Since I'm spending more time at home, I've decided to make time to do my holiday shopping a bit earlier this year. I love giving electronics to my friends and family, so I purchased some headphones, phone cases, and point and shoot cameras for those people in my life who want to take up photography. Before, I'd just click checkout, pay, but not anymore. I saved over $213 and all I had to do was use Honey. I saved over $213.68 and all I had to do was use Honey. No negotiations or waking up at 3 a.m. for a good deal anymore. Honey has helped its over 18 million members save over $2 billion. Did you know Honey supports over 30,000 stores online and they're adding more every day? Users love Honey. That's why it has over 100,000 five-star reviews on the Google Chrome store. It's a one-of-a-kind service and you'll love it. Not using Honey is literally passing out free money. It's free to use and installs in just a few seconds. Plus, it's backed by PayPal, so you know it's good. Get Honey for free at joinhoney.com/onpurpose. That's joinhoney.com/onpurpose. What do companies like Ring and Hint have in common? They all use NetSuite to accelerate their growth. In order to be successful, you have to take direction from others who are crushing it in their business. And one simple thing you can do for yours is use NetSuite. Successful companies know that in order to grow faster, you must have the right tools. If you want to take your company from 2 million to 10 million or 10 million to hundreds of millions in revenue, NetSuite by Oracle gives you the tools to turbocharge your growth, especially in tough times. With NetSuite, you get a full picture of your business, finance, inventory, HR, customers, and more. It's everything you need to grow all in one place, right from your phone or computer. NetSuite will give you the visibility and control you need to make the right decisions and grow with confidence. NetSuite is the world's #1 cloud business system trusted by more than 19,000 companies. It's seriously the last system you'll ever need. Schedule your free product tour right now and receive your free guide, the 7 key strategies to grow your profits, at netsuite.com/J. That's netsuite.com/J, netsuite.com/J. Business grows here. Yeah, I always feel that we have this extreme of like, when we're going through something, we either ask everyone for every opinion, or we do the opposite where we ask no one for nothing. Like you don't even ask the experts or a therapist or someone who can actually help you get closer to the answer.
And the reason we don't ask is because of shame. I think so many times we keep these secrets from ourselves, from other people, because we feel we have so much shame around the fact that we're even struggling with something. So many people keep secrets from me as a therapist. And Carl Jung called secrets psychic poison. And I think that's what they are, is like when we keep something, and there's a difference between, of course, privacy, which we all need to have, and secrecy. Secrecy is about shame. Privacy is like a healthy boundary.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah.
Secrecy is, I can't tell this to anybody. I get this so much. I see a difference too between the way men and women keep things to themselves, right? So many men will come in and they'll say, I've never told anyone this before. And then what they tell me feels like, really? That is your big secret? And I feel so much compassion for them because I feel like it's so sad that in our culture, we tell men, you cannot be vulnerable. You cannot share this because you will appear weak or, whatever it is. It's not okay. Women will also come in and they'll say, I've never told anyone this before. But then they'll say, except for my mother, my sister, and my best friend. So they've told maybe 1 to 3 people, but for them, it feels like it's a secret and they haven't told anyone. So I feel like, what is this shame about? Why is it so hard when the reality is that we're all going through similar things. And if we don't talk about it, we don't know that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's the saddest thing about all of that is we feel like everyone's got it figured out apart from us.
Yes.
Right? It's not only that we feel shame. It's like we feel like, oh, she's got it all figured out. He's got it figured out. And that person in my company's got it figured out, whatever it is, but I'm the only one.
Right. And then what happens is we have this voice in our head that is so self-critical, so unkind, because we don't get the feedback of, oh, this is normal and everybody's going through it. And so we walk around. I had this one therapy patient write down everything that she said to herself over the course of a few days and come back and read it to me. And she comes back and she has this sheet of paper and she says, I can't read this. I'm such a bully. And they were things like, are you going to eat that with those thighs? Or you made the mistake. You're so stupid. Or, oh, look at all those couples. I'll never find anyone. Yeah. And we don't realize that's what's playing in our heads because we don't reality check with other people that they're also struggling with some of the same things.
Yeah.
And the thing is, self-flagellation never enhances our growth. So people think, I'm going to be tough on myself and I'm going to hold myself accountable and then I'm going to grow and change. Self-compassion is how you grow and change. And that doesn't mean not holding yourself responsible for things. What it means is that you can be accountable and you can also be compassionate. And that combination is going to help you grow and change.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, if anyone, I'm just going to throw it out there, if me or Laurie look like we're sweating, it's because we are sitting in a sauna. Like we are in a sauna right now.
With no AC.
With no AC, just for the benefit of this audio for each and every single one of you. So in case you see us sweat, it is the depth of the conversation, yes, but it is also the fact that it is a sauna.
And it's only going to get worse. There will be water very soon.
But Laurie, tell me about what first took you into wanting to be a therapist, because I feel like today therapy is, and I mean, of course, I'm only looking at it in the generation that I'm in, but I'm seeing therapy being a very growing need in the world. I'm seeing it as an industry that I believe we need more qualified people to serve people and to help people and support people. We're seeing the rise of mental health. When you decided to be a therapist, what was your calling to that? And where did you see its role at that time versus how you've seen it evolve?
So it's interesting because I came to the therapy profession very late in life. I never imagined that I would be a therapist. I started off when I graduated from college. I was working doing film development, and then I moved over to NBC, and I was doing primetime series development. And this was a long time ago. This was the year that ER and Friends premiered. So this is
amazing.
1994.
Yeah, great shows.
Yeah. But when I was working on ER, it was interesting because what I loved about working in TV and film too was telling these rich human stories. And I felt like ER did that so well. I mean, nobody goes into an emergency room because they expected something to happen, right? So it's these inflection points in life. And we had a consultant on the show who was a real ER doctor. And I spent some time in the ER with him. And he kept saying to me, I think you like it better here than you like your day job. And he said, you should go to medical school. And I said, well, I'm not doing that. I was a French major. I'm not doing that. But I went to medical school. And I felt like in medical school, you saw the real stories. So it wasn't the fictionalized versions of them. It was real life. And when I got there, it was like, I was up at Stanford, and it was like the dot-com boom, the first one before the bust. And everybody was saying, oh, there's this new thing called managed care, and you're not going to be able to spend time with your patients in the way that you want to. And I was really about had this idea of being the family doctor who guides people through their lives, which of course leads to the therapy thing, but I didn't realize that at the time. And so I ultimately, I started writing when I was there, and I left to become a journalist where I felt like I could really spend time with people, hear their stories, help them tell their stories. And then later, when I had a baby, I was, it was one of those things where I felt like I needed more human contact during the day, adult contact during the day. And the UPS guy would come with all the deliveries and literally I would detain him and be like, hey, how about those diapers? And he would back away to his big brown truck.
Brilliant.
And I thought, something is wrong here. He would, at a certain point, he would like tiptoe to the door, gently put the package down so I could not engage him in conversation.
Talking to strangers.
And right. And so I called up the dean at Stanford and I said, listen, maybe I should come back and do psychiatry. And she said, if you do psychiatry, you'll probably be prescribing Celexa in 15-minute intervals. I know what you wanted to do. Why don't you get a graduate degree in clinical psychology and do the work, the deep work that you want to do? And that's exactly what I did. So I feel like I went from telling people stories to helping people change their stories in the therapy room. I feel like my writing background is so useful because I'm almost like an editor in the therapy room where people come in with these faulty narratives and I help them to rewrite them. One of the things I think people feel when they come to therapy is, I really want to understand who I am. Mm-hmm. And I feel like part of knowing who you are, part of getting to know yourself is getting to unknow yourself. Mm-hmm. It's to let go of those limiting stories that you've been telling yourself over and over, so that you can live your life and not that faulty narrative that you've been telling yourself about your life. Mm-hmm. And that opens you up to so many more possibilities. So sometimes what we think we know about ourselves isn't really accurate. Mm-hmm. And that's the editing that we do in the therapy room.
There are things we each look back on and think, how did I get it so wrong? Have you ever felt that way? It might be wearing multiple polo shirts and popping all the collars, or dating that one person that one time you knew was not good for you. You know the one. We're always going to get things wrong. That's life. But there are also things we can get right on the first try, like shopping for life insurance. That's where our friends at Policygenius come in. Life insurance is not something you want to take a chance or gamble on. This is why this is such an important topic for me to speak on. I know with Policygenius, you're in great hands and will get the best possible care. They make finding the right life insurance a breeze. Literally in minutes, you can compare quotes from the top insurers to find your best price. You could easily save $1,500 or more a year by using Policygenius to compare life insurance policies. Once you apply, the Policygenius team will handle all the paperwork and red tape for free. And Policygenius doesn't just make life insurance easy. They can also help you find the right home and auto insurance or disability insurance. The website is simple, to the point, and effective. You won't be annoyed or confused while using it. Their mission is to help you get insurance right by making it easy for you to understand. Their options, compare quotes, and buy a policy all in one place. Since 2014, they have helped over 30 million people shop for life insurance. So even if you look back on your triple denim days in distress, you'll never be distressed about life insurance with Policygenius. In just a few minutes, you can find your best price and apply at policygenius.com. We all get things wrong from time to time. At least we can get life insurance right with Policygenius. Yeah, absolutely. You're so right. We need to unknow and unlearn so much more than we feel we need to learn about ourselves and know about ourselves. It's the uncovering. In my book, I talk about the analogy that's given in the spiritual texts of a dusty mirror. So it's like if you look into a mirror and you look into it and you ask, what am I looking at? It's like all you see is dust. And that's kind of like our experience of who we are. Whereas when you start wiping away the dust, it can actually be a painful process in the beginning because the dust comes in your face and you cough a little bit and it gets in your eyes, but then slowly you can see yourself. So it's that cleansing away of all the layers of dust that we've accumulated almost.
Right. And when you say it's hard, it is hard. And I think sometimes people imagine that they're going to come to therapy and they're going to download the problem of the week and then they're going to leave and they don't have to do any work.
Yeah.
And you actually do have to do some work. And that's why I talk in the book about the difference between idiot compassion and wise compassion.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, tell us about it. Yeah.
So idiot compassion is what our friends do. It's like, someone breaks up with you and you're like, oh, he was a jerk, even though we know that like this has happened the last 3 times because there's certain ways you behave in the relationship that lead to this outcome. Or, you didn't get the promotion you wanted and we know why that happened because that keeps happening to you. And we say, oh, your boss doesn't see your talent when we really know what's going on. But we don't want to rock the boat and we think we're being supportive. but it's not really supportive. And so, it's kind of like if a fight breaks out in every bar you're going to, it might be you. But we don't say that. That's idiot compassion, right? Yeah. Wise compassion is holding up that mirror, but the clear mirror, not the dusty mirror. Yeah. And it's holding up that mirror and saying, I'm going to help you to look at yourself in a way that maybe you haven't been willing or able to see. And I think you're going to like what you see because it's going to help you navigate through the world in a much smoother way.
Yeah.
And maybe you will have to make some changes, which people, people usually come into therapy and they're like, I want things to change. And what they want to change is someone else or something else. They don't realize that they are going to have to make some changes.
Yeah.
And I want to say, like, you're the protagonist in the story. You're going to have to make some changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I think we struggle with that is, I was talking about this with a friend the other day. We were on a walk and we were saying that she was being really vulnerable and open. She's amazing. I know she listens to the podcast. You know who you are. I won't say names. But it's the feeling of we want people to be honest with us, but we struggle to be honest with people.
Yeah.
So it's a weird circle because it's like me saying, Laurie, I want you to be really honest with me about how this podcast is going. But then when my friend asks me how their podcast is going, I'm not telling them the truth.
Yes.
But I'm expecting you to tell me the truth.
Yes.
And so almost we become demanders of the truth, but not givers of. And then that continues that circle, if that makes sense. And so how do we actually open ourselves up to create space for friendships like that? Because I almost think in the same way as you're saying, we're creating those scenarios in our life, again, at work or in relationships.
Yeah.
We are inviting idiot compassion into our life.
That's right.
Because we're not ready for it almost, right?
Right. We have to be able to hear it. I see this so much with couples that I see. So a lot of times, somebody will say, and I see this most typically in like a heterosexual couple where the woman says to the man, I want you to be really vulnerable with me. I want to understand your inner life. I want you to open up to me. And then he does, and he starts crying, and she is frozen. She's like, whoa, be careful what you wish for, much, right? Yeah, I didn't mean like that, yeah. Right? Or if someone's like, or if the thing that they're being truthful about is something going on between the two of you. And people are so afraid to share that. So maybe they'll be open about something out there. But if it's like, there's something I want to talk to you about us. And the person says, yeah, I want you to be really open and honest with me. Until you really say, I notice this happens between us and here's something about you. And the person's like, whoa, I didn't want to hear that, right? So we're so uncomfortable with other people's truth. You don't have to agree with somebody else's feelings, but you have to know that their feelings are valid, which doesn't mean that you have the same feelings. There's a distinction. It's almost like the difference between when somebody really wants someone to forgive them. And I always say, like, there's a woman in the book, she wants her adult children to forgive her for what she had done. They're estranged from her. And I said, you know what? You can't, you're asking for something called forced forgiveness, that people are not going to forgive you because it will make you feel better. And sometimes not forgiving is okay. It's okay if your children never forgive you. Maybe they will have compassion for you. Maybe they will see you as the mother that they want now, even though you couldn't be that then. We have to learn how to forgive ourselves. But so many times if someone says, I'm really upset about this, we say we want to hear that, but we don't know how to let it in, how to be open to it.
Yeah. And how do you in the therapy room and in your life, and when you're advising people live, or sometimes we assume that people live very problem-driven lives. So when they come and see you, they feel they have to start with a problem.
Yeah.
Or sometimes when you see a friend, you feel like you have to share something that's going wrong for there to be a conversation. I feel like almost problems and wrongs have become better conversation starters, or more, I would say, more comfortable conversation starters for people, as opposed to something positive. Do you see that a lot?
You know what's so interesting? Yeah. I think that we have this weird dichotomy where on the internet, everybody's posting all the positive things. In person, everybody's sharing all the negative things.
So true, yeah.
And so there's not that balance. I think that a lot of the time we're kind of using our friendships to kind of download our problems, but we're not actually listening. When I was training, I was doing my internship, a clinical supervisor said, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. There's a reason for that ratio.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we don't know how to listen. And so sometimes we feel like when someone's telling us something that we need to problem solve for them. We don't know just how to sit with them and not fix it for them. And we don't realize too that sometimes we're helping them by helping them to hear themselves more clearly.
Yes.
And if we talk for them, if we talk over them, they can't hear themselves. We're talking over their internal voice.
That last bit there at the end that you just mentioned is so powerful. We're talking over their internal voice, and actually simply listening to them allows them to hear themselves.
Yes.
And you're so right. I feel like my best conversations are definitely when I can find the narrative just by being able to share and share and share, because most of the time we share, we talk for 2 minutes and the person giving the answer talks for 8. And it's almost like, and now it's like, okay, now do I take that answer? They don't quite understand me. And then, right, it just kind of gets lost. So how do we shift? Is talking about our problems useful? With who is it useful? And when is it useful?
Yeah, I think you have to choose your audience.
Yeah.
I think so many times people have had bad experiences. Let's say that growing up, they had bad experiences. And so then they end up choosing someone who will disappoint them. And then they say, see what happens when I'm vulnerable? See how that doesn't work? Yeah. And what happens is they don't realize that they're repeating this pattern. One thing that therapy really does for people is it helps them to see you are making choices that are repeating, that are helping you to repeat a pattern that is making you unhappy, that is keeping you stuck. And people don't realize that they're doing that. There's a woman in the book who keeps hooking up with the wrong guys, right? And including, by the way, one from the waiting room. I don't mean in the waiting room. It's not that exciting in her office, but she meets him in the waiting room. And I know because of her pattern that, this is going to be a disaster. And she keeps saying, oh, it's the guys, it's this person, it's that person. And she doesn't realize that these people are so much like the people she grew up around. And I don't mean that we're blaming people's parents, because I think that most parents did their absolute best. Most parents really want to be a good parent, but sometimes they didn't know how, or they were very limited, or there were some mental health issues or whatever it might be. And so they couldn't give their kids that mirroring experience that, is something that they would want in an adult relationship. And so with her, it takes her so long to realize that when she meets someone who is going to give her what she wants, she's like, oh, I'm not attracted, no chemistry, right? It's almost like she doesn't know how to be around someone who will give her what she wants. And there's a learning process around, well, wait a minute, just because something feels familiar, like the person who disappoints you, doesn't mean it's right. That chemistry that she kept feeling was like, oh, you feel familiar, come closer.
Yeah.
It's like, no, the fact that you feel familiar should be a sign, like, let's try something different. Let's go into this place of unfamiliarity. And it will be uncomfortable because you don't know the customs in this country. You haven't been to this country before. You're going to have to use your guidebook and learn your way around a little bit. But why don't you see what it's like over in that country?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, absolutely. What is your take on the elusive chemistry when people talk about it in their partnerships? And, the way I've always understood it is I've always felt that when you look at chemistry and compatibility, chemistry is something that I can feel multiple times a day with different people.
Yep.
I can feel it with the barista. I can feel it with my personal trainer. I can feel it with someone I'm just taking the train home with. Like, chemistry is something I can feel over and over again. Compatibility is something I can't. It's not as easily replaceable. It took longer to build, and it's something that I have with less people in the world in general.
Yep.
And so for me, I always look at chemistry as that elusive thing, because I hear the same. My friends will come back from dates and be like, Jay, but there was no chemistry. And I'm like, okay, wait, so tell me about that and how you've tackled helping people understand chemistry and filter it better.
Yeah. So this is, I love that we're having this conversation, because this is such an important part of relationship. So many times people will say, they went on a first date with somebody and they're like, yeah, no, I had a really good time, but there was no chemistry. And I said, well, having the really good time might mean that there's potential for chemistry.
Yes.
But what they do is, because they're on the apps and they say, oh, well, there's like 10,000 other people that I can date. And they just keep recycling and recycling and recycling, and they don't give something time or space to grow. And chemistry sometimes happens right away, and other times it takes time to grow. So there are these surveys that were done where men and women were followed for 20 years, from the moment that they went on a first date through marriages, divorces, all these things. And what happened was, a lot of people have revised their stories depending on what happened later. So the people who are happily married, let's say, a lot of them said, well, tell us about the first date. when they're telling it now, they say, oh yeah, there was instant chemistry. But what they reported at the time was, yeah, I don't know, maybe I'll go on a second date. I don't know. There's not a lot here, but it built. And so their story became, there was instant chemistry, right? Now, the people who were divorced, sometimes they would say, oh, I knew I never liked this person from the beginning. And yet at the time they reported, oh my God, we had this amazing chemistry, right? So it's not very reliable that first time is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
It takes time. So you go on a first date or a first meeting with somebody and you say, did you have a good time? Would you like to spend another hour with this person? And then see whether something develops. Sometimes it does. A lot of the times it does. A lot of the time it doesn't, but you won't know until you give it some breathing room. I should say too that, there's this saying that we marry our unfinished business. And what I mean by that is that a lot of times if you haven't worked through some of these ways of being in relationship that didn't work very well for you, you seek them out in other people without realizing it. So the person will look very different, let's say from your mom or your dad or whomever, and yet, once you get to know that person, you're like, oh God, oh wait, this feels really like, oh, I recognize that. I didn't see that at all, right? So that's our unfinished business. So you really gotta work through your stuff so that you can meet the person that you're going to have true, authentic chemistry with and not this kind of like chaotic chemistry with.
Yeah, chaotic chemistry is a really nice way to put it because that's often what it is. It's like everything's chaotic, but we feel chemistry. It's it's like,
well, people will say, I have so much chemistry with this person, even though I can't rely on this person, or I'm always nervous. I'm always on edge. I never know where I stand with this person, but we have so much chemistry. Yeah.
And it's just, and it's crazy how I'd love to date back actually. And I'm doing some research on it right now. I'd love to hear if you already know it some, but I'm really interested in where that desire for chemistry ever even sourced. Like where it started, like that want that we all have for wanting to feel chemistry. Like I wonder whether it was a movie or, because I remember the first time I wanted a girlfriend was because I watched a movie. Yeah. My favorite character like was attracted to this girl and I was like, oh, maybe I should have a girlfriend. Like I didn't, I was a kid and I didn't even know what that meant. Yeah. But it was just so cleverly planted into my mind that I didn't feel complete without a partner. And it's fascinating to me look at where these things started because sometimes they're just things that you've heard over and over again in movies or books or songs.
I think that we define chemistry as sort of like this instant magical thing. And chemistry is so multifactorial. It's about, what is this energy that goes on between the two of you and how are you together in daily life, not like on the vacation in Tahiti, right? So when people think about spending their lives with somebody, it's about the day-to-day. It's about how do we get through the hard things? How do we listen to each other? How do we deal with the places that we disagree? How do we deal with the differences between us? Because we think of chemistry as like that overlap. Like we both love sushi and rollerblading and this movie and that book and, and we're vegan and, whatever it is, right? Yeah. And that's not chemistry. Yeah. Chemistry is how do we inhabit the same space knowing that we're two separate human beings? And how do we stay connected even with the space between us?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's really powerful. Tell me about dealing with the paradox of being perceived as someone who has all the answers, but also is knowingly trying to grow in their own life. Like, how does that paradox work for you?
Yeah.
When it's like, the perception not only of your clients now, like, you're going to have a TV show about the book, like the book's been so incredibly successful, which is helping so many people. How do you deal with that personally of that feeling of, yeah, I do have answers and I do know how to help people. Obviously, people are being helped. Like you are changing people's lives. And at the same time, you're like, yeah, but I'm still learning and I've still got to work on this and I'm still working on this. How do you deal with that paradox? Or how do you?
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because so in the book, I follow 4 very different patients where I'm their therapist. And then the 5th patient in the book is me as I go through my own therapy with my therapist. And a lot of people say, well, why, are you insane? Why would you do that before the book came out?
I think it's really smart.
And it was, the reason I did it is because I really felt like if my patients were going to be so vulnerable, I felt it would be disingenuous to be the expert up on high, helping these people when I was going through something in my own life. And we all struggle. And so I say at the very beginning of the book that my greatest credential is that I'm a card-carrying member of the human race. And it was so important for me to show how we're all more the same than we are different. And I think that that makes what people can learn from the book so much more powerful and impactful. What's interesting, though, is that even though I was very sure that I wanted to do that, once the book, I was supposed to be writing a different book. I was supposed to be writing a book about happiness. and it just felt so empty to me, because I feel like happiness is a byproduct of living our lives in a fulfilling way, in a meaningful way, is really what we all hope for. But happiness as the goal in and of itself felt like a recipe for disaster. So I felt like it was just, I was a therapist and I was trying to write this book about happiness, and it was making me depressed. Ironically, I called it the Miserable Depression Inducing Happiness book. And so I ended up not writing that book. And then I ended up writing this book. And I thought like maybe 3 people would read it, because everybody said, oh, nobody wants to read a book about therapy. And it's a book about the human condition. And so once the book was turned in and the sales team got it at the publisher, and everybody started like passing the book around. And I thought, oh no, maybe because I thought like 3 people would read it. Now I'm like, maybe 300 will read it, maybe 3,000. I didn't realize we're like 10 months on the New York Times list now.
Yeah,
and so, well, thank you. Awesome. I say that only in the context of, if I had known how many people were going to be reading it, I think I would have hesitated to be so open. I let it rip. I mean, I do not come off well.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very just, here's what happened, and I just let it go. And so I'm really glad that I didn't clean myself up, because I think that if I had, people wouldn't have read it. I think that the reason that people are responding to it and seeing themselves in these stories is because we're all so real in the book. Nobody's cleaned up in the book.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's beautiful. And I do think that message is so much stronger today as well. And I'm really glad that you didn't know how successful the book was going to be.
Yeah.
It's great. And it's funny though, isn't it, that we feel that sometimes like, you would, and I'm glad you didn't, and I know you didn't too, because you're very happy sharing, but it is weird that we think, oh, if that many more people were going to see this, I wouldn't. What is it about that? Is that just more chances and odds of people having issues with us or challenging us? Like, what is that stops us from being more vulnerable the more people see us? Because I feel when you're not well known, it's like you strive to be well known, and then when you meet people who are well known, they're almost striving for more privacy.
Yeah.
It's like, right? I'm sure you see that in your work all the time.
I do. I think that people are afraid. I mean, I think there's shame there, that as a therapist, letting people see me struggle.
Yeah.
And say, here, I do all the things with my therapist that my patients do with me. So you see me, like, I want to be liked by him, and I Google stalk him one night, and I do all these things. And it's embarrassing, because you think, well, people will think less of me. People will think that I'm less competent, or, whatever you imagine. And that's not been the case at all.
Yeah.
I think that people have said, I really value what you share. I really respect you. I admire you for that. And I think that translates to people out in the world being more open with each other, because the title of the book, Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, doesn't mean we should all go to therapy necessarily. It means we all need to talk more to each other. Mm-hmm. And so the more that I can model that for people, if I can't, walk the talk, if I can't do what I'm asking people to do, then there's a big gap.
Yes.
But if I actually do it, I think it helps people to say, oh, well, if she can do it, then I can do it too.
Absolutely. And what have you seen of those patterns of clients that you find that you're working with that have seen the biggest transformations in their life? Are there patterns in those people that they have certain shared beliefs, values, work ethic, habits that help them take whatever advice you gave or other therapists have given them that have actually changed? Like, what has been that kind of X factor that people have shared?
I think that what happens is they release the story that they came in with. And sometimes it's these stories of, there's the content of what they're saying. Like, here's what's going on in my relationship. Here's what's going on with my anxiety. Mm-hmm. And they have a story about it. So they think that the content is the story. But what I'm listening for is sort of the music under the lyrics. So the lyrics are, I'm having panic attacks. Yeah. The music is, what is the underlying struggle or pattern that is getting you into this situation? And once they can see that can translate into everything that happens in their daily lives. But I think it takes courage I think it takes so much courage for them to say, I'm going to make changes. I always like to say that insight is the Booby Prize of therapy, that you can have all the insight in the world. You can say, now I understand why I'm struggling in this way. Now I understand why I have these arguments with my partner. And I'll say, well, did you do something different?
Yeah.
And they'll say, well, no, but now I understand it.
Yeah.
I say, well, you're not really doing the work because you have to do something different. And I love this Viktor Frankl quote that's in the book where he had written, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is the power to choose our response. In our response, it lies our growth and our freedom. So yes, there might be difficult people, but then the question is, what is our role in that? So why are we in that relationship? Or what is our role in making that relationship so chaotic, so difficult, so there's so much tension in it? Why is that? So what is it that we can do next time that person does that thing that triggers us? Can we have a different response? Because the response we keep giving is yielding the same thing. Nothing's changing. So when we talk about insight as the Booby Prize of therapy, it's not just having the insight, it's you have to make changes. And you have to look, that means that you can make changes. You're not going to change the other person, but your changes can influence another person. Yeah. So it's always like doing a dance, right? Yeah. And so if you change your dance steps, that person either has to change their dance steps too, or they will fall flat on the floor, or they can leave the dance floor.
Yeah.
But the good thing is you changed your dance steps. And that's the thing when you say, what is the unifying thing that all of them have in common when they've made changes that have really, really transformed their lives? It's about they chose different dance steps.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I love that analogy of the dance steps. I can visualize it perfectly. And it makes so much sense. And I think one of the things that I hear in that regard that a lot of people I talk to, and I'm getting to get you to give them advice, which is fantastic. And they all listen to the podcast also, is the feeling of like, I know what I need to do to change, but I'm only going to do it for a few days. And if that person doesn't change their dance steps back in line with me right now, I cave or I let go. And sometimes it's genuine and sometimes it's not genuine. Sometimes it's like, well, if they don't change, I'm not going to change. But for a lot of friends, it's like, I'm going to change and I'm going to be the best husband in the world for 3 months. But but she never changes.
Okay, so here's the thing. You're not changing for them, you're changing for you.
100%.
And so if you stop changing in positive ways for yourself, you're letting yourself down. So you're not doing it to get a response from the other person. If you get a different response from the other person, that's great.
Amazing, yeah.
But you're doing it to get a different response from yourself. You're doing it so that you are making choices that align with how you want to be in the world. And when you make choices that align with how you want to be in the world, you will be putting a different energy out there that maybe that will influence somebody potentially, but it will certainly influence you and the choices that you make. So you don't make a change, and it's not a contest. It's not a contest of like, if I change, you need to change, or you need to change first. I see this with couples a lot. Like I'll only change when you change. And it's a fight. It's a historical fight that they have with from their childhood. Like, I'll only change, mom and dad, when you become the parent that I needed you to be back then. Yeah. But you're an adult now. It's like wearing clothes that no longer fit you.
Totally.
And you're still like trying to get those clothes. It's like, take off those clothes. You're free. There's this analogy in the book that I love that my therapist used with me. He said, you remind me of a cartoon, and it's of a prisoner shaking the bars, desperately trying to get out. But on the right and the left, the bars are open. No bars.
Yeah.
Right? And I was like, whoa, I am my own jailer.
Yeah.
We sometimes are our own jailers. We think we're so trapped by everyone and everything else, but we are the ones who are keeping ourselves imprisoned. I just did a TED Talk about this, and it was about the idea that we know on some level that the bars are open, but we don't want to step outside, because if we step outside, we will have to change. And when we change, that means we have to take responsibility for our lives. And sometimes we would rather blame everything that's going wrong on somebody else.
Yeah.
If I take responsibility for my life, then I'm also responsible for what doesn't work. I can't blame my bad mood, my bad day, my bad circumstance, my not taking risks on this other person. I have to be accountable to myself for that.
And how about when people take that accountability, but instead of turning it into action, they turn it into anger? on themselves.
Right.
And I feel that's half of what scares people. Like it's easier to blame everyone else and everything else going wrong because then I at least don't hate myself.
Yeah.
But it's like when you take it inward, and sometimes that can launch you into action. Like I was literally sharing that with a friend yesterday. I was saying that there was a time in my life where I could have sat around and blamed the people around me, where I knew that I had to be accountable and take action in my life and own it. And I was like, this is my life. If I'm going to blame them, I'm going to be sad.
Yeah.
So it shifted me into action. But we find also that it can shift people into anger. How do you stop someone from getting into that space where now they see it all as their fault? And now it's like they're just a bad person and it starts becoming very negative for their self-talk.
Well, I would say two things. One is that we really talk a lot about self-compassion because self-compassion helps you see how complicated human beings are. It helps you see that I'm these things and I'm also these things, and both can coexist. I'm growing here and I'm learning here and I made this regrettable choice here, but I'm going to learn from it. And self-compassion breeds compassion for others. So then we're more compassionate out in the world because we see the complexities of other people too.
Absolutely.
So I think that when we can, instead of turning that, the responsibility into anger, you can say, I'm going to be really kind to myself because no growth can happen without compassion and no growth can happen without vulnerability. And you can't truly be vulnerable if you're not going to be compassionate because you'll have too much of that anger coloring it. So I think that that's part of it. And I think the other thing too is to remember that punishing yourself with anger is going to distract you from something that we all have to face. And this is going to sound like a non sequitur, but it's not, which is that we're all going to die. Okay. Life has 100% mortality rate, and that's not just for other people. And so I think that sometimes we spend so much time in the anger because we don't want to think about, I really do have a limited time here. And we get so scared. We say, oh my God, what am I going to do? I have to make my life worthwhile and I have to do all these things that I want to do. And we get so scared of not being able to accomplish those things that we'd rather sit in the anger so we don't have to think about it.
Absolutely.
So I really want people to be aware of, there's this saying that I love, which is time is the coin of life. Spend it well. You're not spending it well when you're angry either at yourself or at other people. Anger is, there's a thing called the anger iceberg, right? And so it's like this, if you can imagine this image of like the iceberg and here's sort of the waterline, right? And so anger is on top, but underneath are our more vulnerable feelings.
Right.
Sadness, anxiety, regret, whatever it might be.
Anger is just a disguise. It's just the front-facing experience of that emotion.
Yeah. We're so afraid of all of our emotions, even the good ones. We're afraid of joy. There's a word, cherophobia, which is, it's an actual thing. It's fear of joy. And there are people who maybe when they were growing up, whenever they felt like good for a moment, the other shoe would drop. Something bad would happen. And so they got very uncomfortable because joy for them was almost like anticipatory pain. Like it won't last. Yeah. So I'd rather never experience joy than to know that it's going to go away. That was their mindset. Yeah. It's too painful when I get my hopes up and I think everything's going to be okay. And then boom, it goes away, right? And so there are a lot of people who they put all these obstacles in the way of their joy so that they don't have to feel joy because joy is too painful for them.
Yes, absolutely. It's so true. And it's like while you're in joy, you're only thinking about when is this going to end? And when you're in pain, you're thinking about when is this going to end? And that mindset continues. And that same mindset applies to both, right? In joy, you're thinking, when is this going to end? And then in pain, when is this going to end?
Right. And people are afraid of their pain too. And I think there's a difference between pain and suffering. So pain is, we all feel pain because if you're human, you're going to experience pain. But suffering is the ways that we exacerbate the pain, right? So suffering is, I'm going to Google stalk my boyfriend or I'm going to ruminate on this mistake that I made and make myself feel really bad about this thing that happened. That's suffering. So we don't cause our own pain, but we do cause our own suffering.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating how we create suffering, right? We create the suffering. What's that statement about how pain is guaranteed, but suffering is optional?
Right.
And it's something like that. It's like, that's the choice that we get to make. And one of the things I really want to dive into that with you is loss, which we were just mentioning about in the break quickly there. and grief that people experience. And I know for long parts of my life, I personally really struggled with knowing how to deal with people who'd lost someone. For a great amount. I think I'm a lot better now, but it was something I genuinely had to work on. And it's funny because I feel like you're just expected to know how to deal with this stuff, right? Like you're expected to know how to deal with grief. You're expected to know how to deal with breakups, and not just for yourself, but for other people in your life.
Yes.
And in this chapter, you have a chapter where you're talking about John, the character.
Yeah.
Tell us about that experience of dealing with grief and how to support someone you love through grief.
Yeah. So, I think there's a lot of loss in our lives in general, but we minimize the loss. So there are kind of these silent losses. Just before I get into John, there's this idea about, it was a breakup, but not a divorce. So in 3 weeks, you'll be over it, and it's kind of like, so we don't know how to support our friends if they're really experiencing the grief of the end of a relationship where it wasn't as tangible because, it's not a divorce, for example. Or, we see that with, somebody had a miscarriage, but they didn't lose their 8-year-old child. And then people don't talk about the miscarriage and they're so alone in the experience. These are these silent losses because people feel like, well, I can't really, it's even just being single. Okay. So a lot of times people will talk about ambiguous grief. Ambiguous grief is the grief of being single because you don't know when and if you're going to meet someone. So you're always dealing with the loss of not having a partner, and it never ends. In the sense of you can't say, okay, that person's dead now. Not that that ends. Let me be clear. What I mean by that is when somebody dies, you are going through that experience of what they meant to you in their life, and they live on with you in a certain way, and you loved that person. Here you haven't met that person yet. You don't even know who the person is. So you're grieving for the person you have not yet met. And people don't understand the grief of somebody who really wants to be with somebody. And people will make all kinds of comments. Oh, well, you'll meet someone, or, like, oh, you have such a great life. And they don't want to acknowledge that, yes, that might be true. Yes, and this other thing exists, this ambiguous grief of, will I ever meet this person? Where is that person? I'm longing for this person that I don't even know what that person looks like or what their name is. Yeah. Right? So I think that we need to learn how to deal with loss and how to support people in loss. In the book, we have loss in the sense of, even just losing the hope for a better childhood, right? So Charlotte, the woman who keeps hooking up with the wrong guys, what helps her move forward is that in order to move into adulthood, she has to let go of the hope for having had a better childhood. Yeah. If you let go of that, you can move into adulthood and hold that grief. And that's when things open up for you. So there's all kinds of grief that every single person experiences. In the book, we have, loss of a child. We have loss of this young woman goes on her honeymoon and she's in her 30s and she comes back and she has cancer and eventually it turns out to be terminal cancer. And how do you deal with, you have 1 year, they say you have like a year to 10 years to live, right? And so people would say all these things like, have you gotten a second opinion? Like they don't know how to sit with her in the reality of her diagnosis. They'll say things like, well, my cousin took vitamin this and it worked, as opposed to just, this sucks, or I love you so much. So there's a chapter in the book called What Not to Say to a Dying Person, because she wanted to write a book about all the things that well-meaning people who loved her said, but they're so uncomfortable with talking about the truth of the loss. Yeah. Right? So if somebody is experiencing a loss, I hope that we can talk about the truth of the loss with them and not try to distract them from that. Yeah. Because that's what's really going to help them. Yeah. I love that. That's the best advice I've ever heard on loss, for sure. Because everything's a distraction. We're always trying to distract people from their pain. And it's our discomfort. Yeah, it's our discomfort reflecting onto them. Right. Yeah. We say, oh, I don't want to make them uncomfortable. You're actually making them uncomfortable by not speaking about what's there in plain sight. True. Yeah. So this thing is there in plain sight, sitting between you, and you're not talking about that, and you're making them uncomfortable. And they feel like then, oh, I feel so unseen right now because you are trying to make yourself more comfortable in talking to me, and I'm not in this equation at all, and yet you're trying to comfort me. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely think of
there are literally people's faces flashing in front of me right now that when you're saying that, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what they wanted to talk about. That's exactly what they wanted to do. But either I was too scared to go there, or if it was me, people were too scared to go there, or whichever way it was. And yeah.
I was just going to say, it's a little bit like apologies, you know, like who is the apology for, right? Are you apologizing because you really feel you regret that happened and you feel sorry? Or are you apologizing because it will make the other person feel better? And I think that the more that we can have an authentic dialogue and go to the hard places, both people end up feeling seen and heard.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the hope that I'm hoping everyone who listens and watches this conversation is just, and reads the book 100%. Like, I really hope everyone who's listening and watching today reads the book, because I feel like it's exactly that. It's these subtle insights, it's life's all lived in these moments, these transition moments, these pain moments, these tragedy, like these moments, and they define our relationships. They define how much we trust others. They define who we feel loved by and who we feel close to and who we feel far from. Like, for example, when you just want to go to the park on a sunny day and someone doesn't want to go, you don't feel offended by that. Like, it doesn't affect your relationship. But it's like when you're going through something really painful and someone doesn't know how to process that feels like it can make or break a relationship often. And I see that with people deciding who they love by how they feel that person treats them when they're going through something difficult.
That's right. And that's why going back to what I said earlier about choose your audience, that, you know, you want to make sure that the person that you're opening up to is the right person.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 more questions before I ask you the final set of rounds. So 2 questions that I want to end on before we go into the rapid fire rounds are, how do we be a good friend to others? I know it's a very open question, but I want to leave it open so that you can answer it. What is the best way to be a good friend for someone else? And the second question, how do we allow our friends to be the best for us? Because I think that's the part that we don't hear often enough, is how can we help other people help us better?
Yes. We can be a good friend to others by learning to speak their language. So I do that as a therapist all the time. Just because this person comes in with something that's similar to what the other person came in with, they're unique individuals. And you have to learn to speak someone's language. So often we try to take our language and push it onto them. And it doesn't work.
Totally.
Right? So being a good friend means I care enough about you to learn your language. And how can we help someone be a good friend to us is to be open to the differences between us. We need to let those differences be a part of our friendship to enhance our friendship. I think so many people are so worried about, bringing those differences into the friendship. They think, well, there's going to be a rift here. I believe this and you believe this, and we have different ideas about this. That's okay.
Absolutely. That's amazing. Beautiful answers. Thank you so much for sharing those. So we have our fill in the blanks.
Oh my goodness.
And rapid fire rounds. Fill in the blanks is a new segment that we've started this year since the 1-year anniversary of the podcast. So I share sentences and you fill in the blanks. So therapy doesn't mean.
Oh no. Okay, wait a second.
I know. You can think about it.
Okay. An instant fix.
Okay, good. Okay. Humans are innately
ridiculous.
Okay. Shame and guilt are
toxic.
Changing your narrative allows
possibility.
Suppressing your feelings only
makes you sick.
We suffer unnecessarily when
we get scared.
Being vulnerable and transparent can
transform us.
The only way to achieve true connection is
by being courageous.
Okay. Wonderful. Beautiful. That was great.
Okay.
You were fantastic. Okay, that was very good. We often get people who want to go off on a tangent. You did not do that. I appreciate it. Sticking within the rules.
Which is why I had to
it's very good.
about it.
Okay, so these are rapid fire now. Final 5, which is 1 word to 1 sentence maximum.
Okay.
There are very few people that stick to it, but I have deep respect for anyone who does.
If I wasn't sweating before, I'm sweating now.
I know. Okay, fine. All right, here we go. Let's go. We've got a selection here that I can't wait to choose. So, what question do you wish people would ask you more often? How do you feel? Really? Mm-hmm. Interesting. How do you feel?
Right
I'm going
now,
to start the trend.
Right now, I feel very joyful.
You're very kind. I appreciate that. That's cool. That's interesting. I'm going to go off on a tangent. Okay.
Because I have so much to say about that, actually.
Yeah, let's go. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's do it. Yeah. I felt we needed to too. I feel like people don't ask that, or when they do ask that, they're expecting you to say, okay, good, bad.
Right.
Like, you know, it's like we give such bad answers to that question. Like when someone gives me an interesting answer to that question, I'm almost more alert.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. So it's I don't mean, how do you feel, like, oh, hey, how you doing? I mean, I actually want people to be curious. And so I think people are so curious about, like, what's going on? How's that project going? What's going on with it's sort of like all this like content level things, right? I want to get in the process with people in the right context.
Yeah, of course.
So, I think that sometimes we forget to ask the people that we care about how they feel.
I love that. I think that's really cool. Yeah, I misunderstood it when you said it the first time, so I'm glad.
Instead of like, how are you feeling?
Yeah. And it's hard to ask that and answer that.
Yeah.
Because when you ask that, you've got to be really ready to listen and receive.
Yes.
And the person who's going to answer is going to have to try to not give you the 2-minute answer. So.
Well, also a lot of times when people ask that, it's they have an acceptable range of answers. You can feel the ways that are acceptable to me. Which is very different from, they might throw you a curveball, and those curveballs are where your relationship deepens.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Question number 3. When was the last time you felt heard and understood and not in a therapy session?
Right here.
Oh, thank you. It's very kind. All right. Question number 4. You're too good at this, so I need to try and find something that, I want you to be good at it, but okay, this one I really like. If you could create a law that everyone had to follow in the world, what would it be?
Kindness.
And what would that practice be? Like if you had to simplify kindness into that one habit or one practice or one thing that everyone had to do every day as the law, what would it be?
Before you speak, ask yourself, how will this land on the other person?
It's a great rule. Yeah, you would change everything.
Yeah.
You probably wouldn't say much.
I think you would.
You think you would?
I think you would. Okay. I think that we know how to be kind. I think that, all of these obstacles get in the way. But I think that when we take away, all of the noise in our heads, and there's so much noise, we innately know how to be kind. Is it kind? Is it true? And is it helpful? If it meets those 3 criteria, then go ahead and say it. Nice. And once you practice that, you don't need to premeditate so much. You will organically start to just speak that way to other people.
Yeah, absolutely. In the Bhagavad Gita, the book from India, it's called The 4 Austerities of Speech. So is it true? Is it beneficial to all? Mm-hmm. This is my favorite one. Can it be said in a way that doesn't agitate the mind of others? Oh, right. Like it's like that delivery point of like, how can you say it in a way that isn't going to agitate someone's mind? And then the 4th one is it based on spiritual text and foundational text? Okay. 5th and final question for you. What is the biggest lesson you've learned in the last 12 months?
That people really want to be open. And I think that I knew that as a therapist, but I didn't realize, I thought, well, maybe in these little clusters of people who go to therapy, those are the people who want to be open. Everybody wants to tell their story, and everybody has a story. People think, oh, well, my story isn't that interesting, or my story is kind of boring. No, people's stories are fascinating. And I've gone all over the country in the since last April when the book came out, and people are telling their stories, and every single one is fascinating. And they are realizing that their story has value. Yeah.
And often those silent or unheard stories are the stories that are more interesting.
Yes.
We were just talking about that now. Like I know people that are just in my vicinity that have fascinating lives and stories that may never become a movie or may never become a book, but they're just fascinating stories of resilience and human connection and breakthrough power and all the rest of it. And so...
And I think we learn so much from other people's stories. And that's why in the book, so many people have said, oh, I learned a lot about myself, even though they're not in the book, because it's so different. If I say to you, Jay, if I say, you're like this or you do this, you'd say, well, no, I'm not. I don't do that. Right? That's our response. Yeah. But if you see someone else do it, you can say, oh, I'm kind of like that. Totally. Or I do that sometimes.
Totally.
It's very non-threatening to see yourself in other people's stories, which is why I think we all need to be sharing our stories more.
Absolutely. I agree. And thank you for encouraging people to do that. Laurie, you're amazing. Everyone, this is Laurie Gottlieb. Maybe you should talk to someone. Go and grab a copy of the book. I promise you it's a fun read, it's entertaining, and as you've seen, it's deeply insightful and empowering as well. Please, please, please go and grab a copy. Like I said, we will put the link to the Amazon order in the captions and the comments. Laurie, this has been amazing. Like speaking to you has been phenomenal. To sit with you in a sauna/not sauna and to have this conversation. We're both sweating, but I just genuinely want to say, like, I love what you're doing. I love the way you're presenting it. I think it's exactly the language and the storytelling that the world needs today. And I'm so happy that it's had so much incredible success. And I'm so grateful to meet you today. Thank you so much.
I'm so grateful for our conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited for you all to read this. Everyone go and follow Laurie across social media. Where are the best places for people to find you?
They can find me on Twitter at Laurie Gottlieb1. They can find me on Instagram at Laurie Gottlieb_author. They can find me on my website, lauriegottlieb.com. They can read my Dear Therapist column. It comes out every Monday in The Atlantic. They can read the book.
Yeah, perfect. Go and follow her on all of the social media platforms, and I'll be tagging her in all of these posts. If there's anything that Laurie said that really stood out to you, that really resonated, that really connected, please, please, please tag me and Laurie on Instagram and share it so that I love seeing what connects with you. Like, it means a lot to me because it helps me ask better questions for you. It helps me understand our guests better for you as well. So please do that. Thank you for watching or listening. See you soon.